Hi, I'm Jan Doyle. Welcome to Wyse Talk. This is going to be a phenomenal show. It's all about Sacra. What is that? Well, we're going to find out. I have two incredible guests on today's show. One is Dr. Mary Lachman, and the other is Christina Blais. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so happy to have you all. Now, let's just start with Sacra. What is Sacra, Christina?
Sacra is an acronym that stands for the Studio Art Quilt Association. Yes. You always want to make sure you get it right.
Yeah, and I notice I always have to go Studio Art Quilt. I have to use my fingers, and I notice you don't need your fingers.
Thank you.
What's up with that, you know? And how did Sacra come about?
Sacra came about 30 years ago when a woman named Yvonne Porcella sent a letter to about 50 of her friends, an actual letter, not an email, and asking if they wanted to get together and form an organization. So the organization is about 30 years old, and it has grown since in the last 30 years.
About how many people are worldwide?
Worldwide, about 2,300 members.
And in Connecticut?
And in Connecticut, about 110.
That's a very healthy number for Connecticut.
It is, yes.
And let me ask you this, Mary. How did you get involved in quilting? How did that all start?
Well, I always loved quilts. As a kid, we would visit my grandmother who lived in southern Indiana, and all of the beds were covered with these ancient quilts that had been made by family members. And I sewed as a kid, and because we were such a thrifty family, you might say, or cheap, all the scraps were saved. Nothing was ever thrown out. So there was this big bag of remnants in my mother's closet. And so when I finally got old enough to think about putting things together and cutting things in sort of a symmetrical size, I thought, let's try to make a quilt. And this is a quilt that I brought along. This is not my very first quilt, but it's an example of very simple work related to fabric that was in the closet. This was a dress I made. This was a lining of a jacket I made. This was a skirt. This was something my mother made. This was a blouse. But this is seen a lot of wear.
It looks like it's in great shape for something that's seen a lot of wear.
Well, I'm holding the faded part behind me.
Oh, okay.
And you can't see the cat hairs.
Oh, okay, that's good. But you bring up something that's very interesting that quilters, I think all quilters do this, they don't throw a thing out. They like to keep the scraps, they like to keep the remnants. And when you mentioned that this was a blouse, this was a skirt, it brings back wonderful memories, and
yes,
it's a wonderful thing. Now, in front of us, we have another quilt. Now, where did this one come from, Mary?
Well, this quilt was in my mother's cedar chest, and I found it there after she died, and I had to clean out the house. It is a double wedding ring quilt. That's the pattern, a traditional pattern. I believe it was made by her family in Indiana and given to her when she married.
Wow, and you don't think she ever used it?
I do not think she ever used it. One issue with it is it's lined in satin. So if you put it on a bed, it would slide off.
That is very interesting. Lined in, I don't think I ever heard of anybody doing that, and that's probably why, that stands to reason why she wouldn't use it.
Well, they used to use parachute silk sometimes
I didn't know that.
to back quilts.
Did you know that?
I did not know that.
I never heard that either.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. It's a beautiful quilt.
I think it's what they had.
Yeah, it's probably very, very valuable too. So just
certainly
so you know,
to me it is.
Yes, that's a good answer. Actually, probably the best answer. Now, Christina, when people come to a Sacra, why would people come to Sacra, Connecticut Sacra?
Our group, the Connecticut chapter of the Sacra, holds about 4 or 5 regional meetings throughout the year, and we offer them in different locations around Connecticut so that people who don't like to drive too far don't have to go too far for a meeting. So we hold them in all 4 corners of our state, and we have a business portion of the meeting where we talk about exhibitions that are coming up and things associated with the group. But at the end of each meeting, we have what we call show and tell.
Or my favorite way that when you say it is
bring and brag.
Bring and brag.
And so at the end of the meeting, we have the members of our group can show the rest of the group what they've been working on since the last meeting.
Well, let's talk about one of the bring and brags here.
Okay.
We have one of your pieces. What is this piece called?
This is called Duchess Happy Dog. And I made it when I felt like I wanted to make the happiest thing that I could make. And that, of course, was my dog.
And the fabric is just beautiful. Now, where did all this fabric come from?
I think Mary can tell you, and I can tell you, that quilters have a stash.
A stash?
A stash.
What is a stash?
A collection of fabric that we don't throw away. I think if it's smaller than an inch square, I could throw it away. But if it's bigger than an inch square, then I store it away in color-coded compartments.
Yes.
And I start pulling from that stash and start, this particular quilt is called Raw Edge Applique, in which just pieces of fabric are cut loosely and laid down in order to make a pattern.
Now, when you start making color selections, do you have a thoughts in mind, or does it just happen organically?
I definitely have a plan for my quilts. I think that's the best way to start, but sometimes things happen, well, because you don't know what's exactly in your stash. And so as you start in one area and you want to collage and blend to another area, the quilt might start making decisions for you instead of you making the decisions.
That's an interesting way of saying it. Now, I noticed you glammed it up a little bit. How did that happen?
My model for this quilt is my dog, and he's a boy. But as the colors started to come through in this, I realized that this was a more feminine dog. That's the way I looked at it. And so I kind of added like the paisley ear, and she got a big pearl necklace for her collar.
Very, very nice.
Thank you.
Very nice. Now, so this is applique.
Yes.
And Mary, you have a little bit different style. Tell me a little bit about your bring and brags.
Well, I work in a variety of styles, really, Jan. I haven't settled in on exactly one that is my favorite. So this piece I call Rear View Mirror. It is based on an image that I see every day on my commute into White Plains, New York, where my day job is. It uses hand-dyed fabric and some fabric collage and some thread stitching to emphasize these winter trees. This is another example of an art quilt. This was based, it started with a base of a stencil on hand-dyed fabric. The stencil was this facade of a building, and then I embellished it with portions of fabric that were cut out for this medallion, different designs that I put on the wall, as well as some rubbings, some oil stick rubbings. Another style that I've worked in is this. This is a piece of vintage crochet, an old table runner. And
now, where did that come from, the table runner?
This also came from my mother's estate. It had a big stain on it. I couldn't bear to throw it away. And I used wool roving. That's wool before it's spun into yarn.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And you can lay it on another fabric, a natural fabric, like cotton, which is what the crocheted work is. And then you wet it and rub it, and it will anneal itself to the other fabric. Then I stitched over the top and embellish it. I call it Brown-Eyed Susans. This was actually featured in one of the quilting arts magazines.
Oh, terrific!
A couple of years ago.
And then the back of it is interesting. You didn't show the back. Now,
Yes,
many times quilters love to see the backs of things,
Yes,
which is
we like
unusual.
we love to see each other's stitching, because
Yes.
often this is done in a free motion style where you drop your feed dogs on your sewing machine and then you just move the fabric around very smoothly, and it allows you to do all kinds of different
but what
designs.
kind of fabric is that on the back?
This is also wool roving as a layer on the back. So
Okay.
it could be a reversible piece, or could be hung in the window.
Oh, you know, you're right. You're absolutely right. Excellent. Now, I noticed you have you have variety of styles that you like, and you talked about dyeing your fabric, and I know we have some examples of your own hand-dyed fabric over here.
Yes.
And do you do that a lot?
I do it when I need a piece of fabric.
Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting answer. And you have a piece over there that I absolutely love, that piece.
This is indigo dyed, and it was used making used by folding the fabric and using clamps as a resist, which allowed the white to remain, and then the dye was only absorbed by the fabric, that was not compressed by the clamps.
Because it looks to me like little picture frames, and what I should do is put a picture in it. And that's why it really speaks to me.
Well, it's a large piece, and I haven't really decided what to do with it. So it's just on my thinking, in my thinking box right now.
There, and that's what quilters like. So my style is, this is my fractured owl, and what I do is I take photographs and then I have them printed on fabric, and then I do something that's called thread painting. And so my owl comes through, and I noticed that when I looked through it a little later, I liked using some metallic thread. So we all have 3 different areas that we enjoy, but does that mean if someone wants to come to Sacra, they have to fit into one of our areas?
Absolutely not.
They don't? Can they bring their own style and their own interests?
Art quilts are not meant to be functional utilitarian quilts, such as older quilts like this one.
Or the quilt that you have on this
was meant to sit on someone's lap or be on the bed, whereas art quilts are, the whole subject of it being art is that it would evoke emotion or express some inner feeling that the artist is trying to present to the public.
And that's a very interesting way of saying it. And so Sacra is an organization that is dedicated to art quilts, not necessarily utilitarian. Utilitarian.
Yes. But Sacra has a very broad definition of what a quilt is.
What is their definition?
It references 3 layers.
But so it has to be at least 2 layers.
It has to be at least 2 layers. But basically, a traditional quilt or an art quilt would have a top layer, a batting, and a backing. And then when you secure those 3 layers together, that is a quilt. And you secure it by quilting. And the top can be made in any fashion. You can sew the top together, you can applique the top together, however you make the top is how you make the top. But when you have 3 layers and you secure them together, then you have a quilt. But the definition for Sacra is that you just have to reference the quilting process.
So at least 2 layers, and some of the stitching is supposed to show on the back of the piece. But it doesn't have to be all over the back of the piece. It doesn't have to be all over the front. It just has to reference a quilt.
So that leaves the individual artist a wide interpretation. And if you come to a Sacra meeting or you go online and look at the website of some of the work, you'll see that it's open to whatever the person's imagination is.
Exactly.
And it's absolutely phenomenal what you see. Now, we have something, we talk about exhibiting some of the quilts, and we have what are called calls, and we have what is it called in Connecticut, Sacra?
The Connecticut Sacra has an exhibition that we've had going on for about the last 6 years, and it's called Local Color. And the first year that the exhibition existed was titled Local Color, and the theme was anything that had to do with the state of Connecticut. And then 2 years later, we had a second one called Local Color Connecticut Stories, and that show was anything about the Connecticut history, a history story, or your story as it pertained to living in Connecticut. And currently we have a show called Local Color Inspired by Science, and that will be at the Windsor Arts Center September 1st through mid-October. And So we have these exhibits.
Okay, when this is aired, that timing is not, might not even make any difference at all, because this is going to be shown several times on the channel and on YouTube. So the date is not really of any consequence, because we're going to live forever on this show. So I'm just saying. But it's shown. But if people want to find out where local color is being shown, what could they do to find that out whenever they view this?
We maintain a blog, which is accessible to the public. Mary is our blog master.
Yes.
Wow.
So
oh, master, oh, master.
Yes, kiss my ring.
Yeah.
So if you were to Google Sacra CT, SAQACT, blog, BLOG, it will pop right up. And you can see all of the latest activities of Connecticut Sacra.
Well, that brings up something interesting. Do you have to be a member of Sacra to come to Connecticut Sacra?
No, the meetings are open to the public.
And you can share your work. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the other activities that are open only to members. Is that correct? So, like, if someone wanted to exhibit, do you have to be a Sacra member?
If you are exhibiting in a Sacra show, so a national or international Sacra-sponsored show, yes, you have to be a member of a Sacra region.
So that would help someone who's interested in joining Sacra to join nationally. So let's talk a little bit about the calls. We have some pictures coming up on the monitor, and we're going to see our first picture is going to be a dog.
Yes.
Let's hope it comes up. And
Yes.
what was this for, Christina?
There was a national call for entries from the Sacra National called Textile Posters. And I immediately thought of the French posters of Le Chat Noir, and I wanted to translate those posters, or that style of posters, into my dog. And I have a little aside here, and that's one of our friends in Sacra said, if it's distracting you from your quilting, it means you need to make quilts of it.
Oh,
and when
I
I
love that.
got this dog, I was truly distracted, and I decided that I needed to make quilts of it. And so my dog Dutch has become a theme in my work. So I made this quilt for the show Textile Posters, and I submitted it, and it was accepted into the show.
Yay.
With 24 other quilts. And I'm happy to say that this too has been in the Quilting Arts magazine. I'm very excited about that, because I think as artists we always want to share our work.
Yes, it's an
have
acknowledgement.
Yes, and to
Yes,
have
and
it
you
have
work
it be
so
seen.
hard.
So
Yes.
so this is this was from the National Call for Textile Posters, and that's one great thing about being a member of Sacra, is that there are these national calls, and if your work gets accepted there, then the work can travel all over the country.
Well, that is a good thing about being not a member of Sacra. So if one wanted to be a member, we don't handle the membership on a local level, but I suggest that you Google Sacra, and there's a membership form on there that
Right.
you can handle, or
Yes.
you can fill out and become a member of. Now we have another picture coming up of a lobster.
Right.
It's the cutest looking lobster I've ever
Thank
seen.
you very much. In our first call for entry about local color, things about Connecticut, the first thing I thought about was the lobstering industry, and I wanted to make a lobster to bring attention to the fact that the lobstering industry has dwindled significantly in the Long Island Sound, and that's what prompted me to make this piece. And that was juried into our local color show, one of the very first works that I ever made.
I have to ask you,
Yes.
did you eat this lobster?
I did eat that lobster. I took a photograph of the lobster while he was on my kitchen counter. I thanked him, and then had a
that's so
delicious
sweet.
dinner. Yes.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's very spiritual, very Indian spiritual.
We are a little spiritual.
Yeah, that's very sweet. And the next one is a picture of a fish when that's
Yes.
coming up.
This is a very special fish. This is the American shad, which is the state fish of Connecticut. I think
Who knew that? Mary,
Yes.
did you know that?
I did not know
I think
that.
that as soon as a call for entry is announced, one of the first things I do is start researching and Googling, and I found out this American shad was a state fish of Connecticut, and I think it represents perseverance that the early settlers of Connecticut had to have, because this is an upstream.
Is it a freshwater fish?
I don't know.
I have no idea.
I believe it. I believe it is a freshwater fish, but it can also be in the
brackish water.
brackish water. Yes.
Okay, we need to move along. There's another one that is of Mary's images that is called Cosmos. Tell me a little bit about Cosmos, Mary.
Cosmos is made with hand-dyed fabric and oil stick rubbings, as well as fusible applique. It is meant to represent the sky and the stars.
Very interesting. And you added another technique that we haven't mentioned here, which is the paint sticks.
Yes, yes. So a raised, something like a corrugated cardboard is placed underneath the fabric, although it's usually a rigid plastic form. And then you take these oil sticks and you rub them over the over atop the fabric, and it is oil paint. You have to give it room to dry. It takes a few days, but it creates some interest. You can create some interesting designs.
Oh, interesting. And then the next one we have is
Cellular organelles.
does this have to do with you being a doctor?
Well, I'm a pathologist, and I'm working on a series related to the cell, and this to me is sort of the inside workings of various parts of cells, from the mitochondria to the endoplasmic reticulum, and we can talk about that later.
Oh, I can't wait. I want to read about it. so that's very, very interesting. I also like how that you're a doctor and that your quilt work is related to that somewhat. Now, we don't really have that much time left, so I just kind of want to talk about who becomes members of Sacra. What are their backgrounds?
To become a member of Sacra, all you have to do is like art quilts. You don't have to be an art quilter. You just have to appreciate them, but it's an organization of collectors and people who want to promote the art quilt.
But if you're a maker and you get tired of making traditional things or following someone else's instructions, like I think we all have, then art quilting and Sacra organization is just a perfect segue to continue growing as an artist.
That's an interesting observation that I'm glad you made, because I've talked to other people and they have not been able to follow those directions or make the pattern come out, and they've gotten extremely frustrated with it and threw it down. But I think one thing that unites all people, all quilters, artistic or traditional, is that we love to touch fabric.
Yes.
We love the fabric.
Yes.
And so when if it's all about the fabric, then you can get rid of all the patterns and all the rules and regulations.
You have to get rid of the voice in your head. You've
voice,
got to
that's a
get
good
rid of
point.
the quilt police.
The quilt, yes, that's a very good point.
They do exist in some organizations, but not in Sacra.
Not in Sacra. So what are some other things that local regions have, Christina?
Our region is going to have has small groups that meet. So if you can't get to a regional meeting, or the regional meetings aren't frequent enough, there's a small group in the Hartford area, there's a small group in the Shoreline area, and other groups are forming so that on a monthly basis, people can get together and show their work and perhaps critique their work if that's what they want, and just to kind of keep the camaraderie going. I think that's one thing that I really sense in the Sacra group, both on the national level and on our local level, is that we have a camaraderie.
I think you're right. We really haven't mentioned the socialness and the camaraderie of it. And I also want to mention that if you live in an area and you're a member of Sacra and there is no group, start your own group.
That's right.
Absolutely.
So that we have one, as you said, in the Hartford area and one in the Shoreline area, but it doesn't mean all these other areas of the state. We want you to start a group. We want you to call people, and these groups are open to anybody. But there's a limit. There's a logistical limit because they're in people's homes, and you can't have 108 people in there unless you have another kind of house, and then I'll be very jealous. So now let me ask you this: where do you have a website, Mary?
I do.
What is your website that people could learn more about you?
My name, MaryLachman.com.
And what would they find on your website?
They would find examples of my artwork. They would find a little bit about me. They would find a connection to my blog. They would find out about the book that I wrote called Moth at the Window, which does not have to do with quilts, but it gives you background of why I quilted, the essence of my raising up, you might say. Yeah.
Good. And Christina, do you have a website?
I do have a website, ChristinaBlais.com.
How do you spell Blais?
B-L-A-I-S.
Okay, just checking because I know I had issues. I just saying.
It's a French name.
Yeah, I have lots of issues, but I did have issues with that.
Yes, and I have a gallery on my website, so just about all of my work, and I have a blog, and my website is just starting, so I haven't blogged that much yet, but I'm planning on blogging about the experience of art quilting frequently. And I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, Christina Blais Art Quilter, and that's a little easier to update for people to see what I'm working on or what's going on in the art quilt world. Yes.
Well, that's terrific, and I have a website, but it's not having to do with this life as an art quilter. I have to work on changing it. It's a lot of work that I just seem to don't find the time for, but I will have to make it. But if people wanted to find out about Sacra, where would they go to get that information?
Just Sacra.com, SAQA.com. And on the Sacra website, there are places that people can look around and learn more about the organization. But once they become a member, then that unlocks other resources that are on the web page for people to use.
Well, that's a very good distinction you just made, because I never really kind of noticed it because it unlocks automatically. But you do get a lot out of it if you join Sacra.
Absolutely.
But if you want to kind of dip your toe into it right now, you can go on the website and see when our next meeting's coming up because we announce it on the website. I don't want to give the date now because this is going to be shown long after I die.
Yes.
So I won't even be alive. But just for reference sake, Christina and I are the Connecticut reps right now, and we have a lifespan of 2 years. So somebody will be replacing me as if we were replaceable.
No one could ever replace
but
you.
I'm getting over that part too. So I sincerely hope that people come and watch. So if you want to learn more information about it, please go to Sacra.com or the Sacra Connecticut, and you can find more information there. If you want to contact me, you can do that at jmdteach@comcast.net, or you can always contact the studio, BCTV. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you,
Really
Jen.
appreciate it. You really. It is a lot of fun. I mean, we're talking about quilts. So